All right, so today I've got the wonderful Anne Marshall. I've grabbed some of her very valuable time as we've just been discussing. Brief introduction for you. Anne is possibly the most dynamic yoga teacher I've ever had the pleasure of meeting and knowing. And who better to quiz on some techniques, some exercise, movement-based work, breathing-based work, relaxing-based work than Anne, and she was very kind to speak with me today and perhaps help us out. So how are you doing, Anne? You okay?
I'm good, thanks, Rob. Yeah, you okay?
I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, I'm fresh back from my daily exercise with the family, so hopefully we've tired the kids out and they're going to remain quiet in the background, but we'll just have to see. And what about you?
Yeah, good. Early rise and caught the best of the day, took the dogs out, and yeah, and beautiful day really. So just making the most of it. Yeah.
And how are you finding this whole bizarre scenario?
I think I was saying to you that one of the women that I teach, she described it as watching everything as if stood behind a mirror.
Right, that's a good way to look at it, isn't it? Yeah.
That really resonated with me because it's all a bit odd. Everything kind of looks the same, but on a deeper level we know that it isn't. But I think for me, I make the most of the time, to be honest. I'm studying, I'm reading, I'm gardening, I'm cooking, I'm walking, you know, so there aren't many or even any days where I'm bored at all. I'm fine.
That's certainly the key, isn't it? Whether you've got children or not, or if you're just, in your own company or with a partner. But I think for most people, the real key is to probably experience boredom again, to get to understand what boredom is like. But then outside of that, skill acquisition, as you've mentioned there, studying, which is great. If people could pick up a book, or there's loads of online training. I know that you said yourself earlier that you've enrolled into some online training as well to make the best use of the time. Is there, particularly within your own skill set, as I mentioned at the start, you're not just a yoga teacher. That's doing you a bit of a discredit, I would suggest. You're skilled in so many different forms of yoga. Is there anything in particular that you well, absolutely, it's always proven the case. But yeah, have you been practicing any particular type yourself?
I practice yoga every day, and I meditate. I'm used to sitting with myself and understanding how I'm feeling. And I don't think I ever hit the boredom thing. I just, on a morning, I'll kind of understand what it is I'm feeling, and I'll deal with it, which we'll come on to talk about when we'll talk about meditation. And yeah, it just it turns me in the right direction to go and do what I need to do. And that's kind of what I've done most days, actually, probably every day.
So not so much a structured routine where it's very regimental. You're doing this thing at this hour every day of the week. You're actually using your skill in your yoga practice, starting the day with a meditation, and that, just thinking and feeling what your body essentially, so more intuitively, wants to do on that given day. And so most of this, as you said there, you're studying in more depth about breathing techniques, perhaps in particular. Do you see that fits in extremely well? Is it a valuable kind of practice for people to consider doing at the moment, given the circumstances?
I think hugely with breath. I think with a lot of people, there's no knowledge of what the breath can do at all. but it's when you start to maybe you start to practice yoga, or you kind of undertake a breathing program, that you start to appreciate how the breath can change things. So, you know, for instance, in yoga, there is a breath to cool the body, there is a breath to heat the body, there's a breath that soothes the throat and the voice box, there's a breath to calm, there's a breath to energize, you know, there's a breath to help you sleep. And so I mean, you know, manipulation is almost kind of sounds like a negative word, but it is, in yoga, we call it pranayama. It's
Right.
It's about controlling and regulating the breath, and really the way that I term it in class is making the breath work for you.
Right. So I guess in circumstances at the moment, you're suggesting we perhaps harness a breath in a way that's going to be of benefit for perhaps the emotions that people have at the moment. And certainly the emotions I hear a lot from my clients consistently are ones of, you know, fear, anxiety. No one really knows what's around the corner. No one even knows at the moment when this whole situation will end as such, you know, particularly with lockdown. So, you know, given those kind of emotions, is there a particular breath practice that you found historically works better for people?
I think often I would teach a belly breathing, so that we are moving away from any sense of fight or flight, and belly breathing is it's a calming breath. But to be honest, Rob, I tend to find that belly breathing is best taught as a byproduct of an opening meditation. So people who are stressed, and this might resonate with a lot of people now, if they're stressed, anxious, worried, they might be breathing high up in the chest. So this high, shallow chest breathing. And
so more use of accessory breathing muscles,
exactly,
coming up off the shoulder girdle up into the head.
Exactly.
You're consistently explaining to clients, aren't you, that these muscles that we've tuned over time to become the drivers of our breathing actually have a far more important primary role, which is to give us good posture through our neck and to hold the heavy head on top. So a lot of us get caught up in a situation where those muscles are then almost expected to be the triggers of breath and to maintain the breathing pattern. Yeah. Coupled with, particularly for people at the moment working from home, they're working in awkward postures, stress levels are going to be a lot greater. So these muscles are really getting a hard workout, and that can't carry on, right? Yeah. You know, it's going to fail. It's going to cause other problems, chronic ill health possibly. So an abdominal breath is best, as you say, something quite slow and low, as I would describe it. Is that the sort of thing you refer to?
So I think with if somebody is breathing high in the chest, it's kind of, you know, maybe kind of placing the hands, one on the chest, one on the abdomen, and noticing which part of the body is moving when you're breathing. And as opposed to the chest rising, the top hand rising, you want to flip that so that it's the bottom hand that actually is moving and the chest is relatively still. But as I say, I think if you take somebody through a guided meditation, and I know we're gonna offer people that anyway, through by taking their awareness away from stress and worry and their anxiety, the breath starts to shift on its own. So we might come from a much higher, shallow breath down into this kind of more calming belly breathing. But one breath that I do like is I like a gentle diaphragmatic breath, because I think as well, when people are shallow breathing, they're up here, I think a lot of people have no awareness of all of the space, you know, in the side ribs, in the back ribs, and how the lungs expand. And I think teaching a gentle diaphragmatic breath is calming, but it's kind of slightly energizing at the same time, you know. So it's probably, you know, you probably can do it before you go to sleep in a really calm way. But I think to bring somebody out of a fight or flight situation, it's a nice and quite a straightforward breath to teach, I think, as opposed to, I know from experience of teaching people belly breathing, that's a really odd sensation for people to switch that around. So that's why I prefer to do that through a guided meditation, and then get them to notice, you know, now how you breathe. And now you've taken your awareness away from all of the things that are worrying you, then, you know, the breath will settle on its own. I mean, as soon as they realize, they'll start to change their breath again. But I think that's a good way into belly breathing, into a more kind of rest, digest way of being. And but I do think with the diaphragmatic breath, you can do it in a very calm way that suddenly makes you aware of all this space that you probably didn't realize you had. And then you can build that up to really energize and really get some, you know, some oxygen into the lungs, and to breathe in a more efficient way. But, you know, part of the problem with that at the minute as well is that when people are worried and stressed, as you well know, their posture starts to reflect how they're feeling in their mind, and there starts to be this kind of rolling forwards of the shoulders, maybe the head forwards posture. The problem with that is that we're also compressing the thoracic area, and we want to get that opened up so that they can breathe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that classic saying of posture dictates emotion and emotion dictates posture. You know, it couldn't be more pronounced, I would have thought, at the moment. And going back there, what you were saying about trying to stimulate breath to travel further through the body to find the abdominal cavity. You know, it's one of those things, I think, and perhaps having practiced it for a long time now, as yourself, you know, when you first set out to do this, it's making people aware that it's not that straightforward, and to not expect it to just be as simple as go and do some belly breathing, you know, because as you've said there, you're going to have to shift the way that the body recruits the breath, and consciously think about it rather than it happening subconsciously and going to the area of least resistance in your lungs. We actually want it to get as deep as possible. Often what I'll suggest people do is they start off in a posture that's far more supportive. So when you're trying to change the way that you breathe, it kind of makes sense to get good at it first, lay down where the body's more supported. It feels like it's got more support through the spine, which gives it one less thing to worry about. So you start to stimulate a slower breath, and it allows that person to get it to travel deeper. So interesting, I find you mentioned there that if you were to incorporate a belly breath alongside a meditation, the two work hand in hand, in a sense that you could almost begin a meditation and that would then allow the breath to travel further. Could you explain to us the difference between meditation and mindfulness? So is that belly breath mindfulness of breathing, or is it as a result of meditation, or is that much the same thing?
With the breath, it's kind of like a watched kettle never boils. So I think when you're putting too much focus on the breath, there's a tendency it becomes almost counterproductive. People get quite stressed about and tense from when they're trying, if I'm asking them or trying to direct them to breathe in a particular way, you know, the point that you made there about that kind of shift from high up and trying to recruit the breath in a different way. It's not that easy to do, is it? It's not. And so when they realize that actually I can't breathe as you want me to breathe, then that makes them more tense, which then is that vicious cycle of their breath rises a little higher, you know. And so for me, that's why I prefer to take somebody through a guided meditation, you know, really simple one, Raw, but you just and we'll talk about it as far as mindfulness is concerned, because it takes their focus from how they're breathing, and what it does is it because it shifts the focus from the breath is allowed to just do what the breath does when the nervous system starts to calm down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So you're, as you said, you're kind of drawing them away from that fight or flight scenario. And that point you make is absolutely spot on, because I think when you're triggering people to think about something that happens subconsciously, as in the breathing, they do become almost panic stricken. You know, it's almost like a catching of breath rather than being able to just switch into controlling it.
Yeah.
So sorry, yes, you're saying that with the meditation that can occur, it makes it a bit easier. Where does mindfulness fit into that?
So mindfulness is a form of meditation. I think mindfulness is a really good place to start for anybody wanting to meditate, because mindfulness is about focusing on one thing or one thing at a time. And it really relates to the sensory information that you're taking in. So it might be that, you know, there's this belief as well that you can only meditate when you're sitting and, you know, and cross-legged on the floor. So mindfulness, you might walk and you might be really kind of aware of your feet striking the ground and the feeling through the feet, the feeling through the legs, how you're breathing. You can sit, you can, you know, whatever you want to do, really. It's really about being aware of what's happening as far as your body is concerned. What are you feeling? What kind of feedback is there? What kind of sensory information is there? Then it just holds the focus nicely before you move more deeply into meditation.
Okay, so sorry, so mindfulness is more being present in the moment. Yes. in your own body. So yes. and as you rightly say there, which I would not argue with people about this, but I would suggest, I'm saying argue because I have had this discussion with my best mate, trying to explain to him how my outlook on running is that I see it as what I would term as kinetic meditation. So I mean, we can talk a little bit more about this, but what you're suggesting there with mindfulness is you can do that on the go. So you could be out and about on your daily form of exercise, but just be a little bit more present in your own body. So your steps, you're conscious of, perhaps the environment around you, you're conscious of, your breathing, you become more conscious of, but you just take that opportunity to think a little bit more about what's going on within you. Is that kind of the sort of thing you're suggesting?
That's exactly it. So you can take a mindful walk, yeah? And when you're walking, you might notice nature, colours, you might hear the sound of the birds, you might feel the sun on your skin, there might be a particular smell. It's all of these things that hold your attention. So when it brings you into the present, the beauty of it, and it takes practice like most things, but the beauty of it is that the past, and I'm talking kind of the last moment and anything that came before, and the future, where all those kind of anxieties might be tangled up, they fall away. You're in the present moment. This is all we have, the present moment. We can't move beyond this moment. So it's about experiencing the moment in your physical self. That's how I look at mindfulness meditation.
Okay, so that, as you said, that could be done literally anywhere, anytime.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, at the moment, it's a fantastic tool to have, and to perhaps go to. And you did hint earlier, I know that you and I spoke about this before we started this conversation, but you did hint earlier that we'll perhaps offer a guided meditation, you know, a mindfulness, perhaps similar process that you'll offer as a separate snippet we'll put out there so people can access that and use that. So for now, we'll talk around the subject, but you'll come up with the content after this. So at which stage does that mindfulness practice shift into a meditative practice? When does it become, would you describe it as becoming a deeper discipline?
I mean, I suppose some people just prefer mindfulness meditation because I think particularly as things are, and if people are suffering with anxiety, depression, mental health issues, to be in their head a lot is not where they really want to be. So I think with mindfulness, it kind of it doesn't go so deep. It is literally noticing. You know, we say a lot in yoga about observing and just notice without judgment, and that's what that's about. And it kind of, I think, keeps you on the surface and just being aware of the senses and what you're taking in. So, you know, Rob, I don't know when there is a switch over from one to the other, or whether there ever needs to be. I think for me, practicing yoga for a long time, if ever I went to a class, that's what we did. We didn't do mindfulness meditation particularly. We were kind of, we would sit quietly, we would sit with ourselves, and it's so the difference being, so in yoga there are 8 limbs. They call them 8 limbs, you know, 8 paths to yoga. So the first 2 are around ethics and observances, how you behave, how you treat the world, how you treat yourself. The next 2 are physical postures and pranayama, which is the breathing. And then there are 4 which are all around meditation. So not mindfulness, but around meditation. So each stage of through those 4 steps takes you deeper within. So the first is about turning your awareness inwards and letting go of anything externally. And then it becomes about shifting your awareness deeper inside, and maybe mindfulness in a sense that you might find one point of focus. So moving into chakras, which are energy centers that run through the center of the body. You might gaze to the 3rd eye internally. You might chant a mantra to yourself. But it takes you to a deeper level, and it isn't about suppressing thoughts, but it isn't about creating them either. It's that space in between where you can find stillness and quietness, and you literally just sit with yourself and you become aware of yourself there. And for me, from experience, it's when I do that, that I get access to this reservoir, this resource of wisdom and knowing and problem solving, and letting go of the struggle of everything, of trying to be, of trying to do, of trying to breathe in a particular way. I think that's where people sometimes go wrong with meditation. They try too hard at it. They think there's got to be a particular outcome. They think they've got to close their eyes and see a particular thing, and it just isn't that way. It's just about I don't even want to use the word finding. It's just about arriving at space between the thoughts.
Okay, yeah, and really fascinating, that, because I think you're spot on. I'm a victim of this myself. A victim. I'm probably guilty of it. Is a better way of describing it. But I know when I was first taken through a guided meditation, I probably put too much expectation on myself. I had this stereotypical image of how I should be, as you said, sat cross-legged and almost floating into that kind of space where everything was blocked out. And it's a very hard thing to achieve, and it's very unique to every person, isn't it? There's certainly a meditation that works best for each individual, and it can take some time to figure that out yourself. But perhaps the most important suggestion for people at the moment is, if they are finding they have a bit of extra time, ideally if they have some time to themselves, or they can create some time to themselves. A lot of people aren't making that long commute to and from work now, so consider getting up at the same time, but instead of jumping in the car or getting on the train, find a space in the house and get in a comfortable posture, sit in a posture that's not going to be forcing strain in the body. Start with the breath and just process the emotions, just acknowledge them, right? Is that the sort of thing that you would?
Yeah, I mean, there are things as well. There are apps that can help you now as well. Things like Headspace and Calm and various other things on the market. But I mean, yeah, you've described it really well, actually, because the way things are right now, we're feeling a particular way. I know for me in the first week, I just felt like a rabbit caught in the headlights. When all of this was just unfolding and you can't quite get a grasp on the situation. And so I think the underlying emotion for a lot of people is fear. It's fear and it's uncertainty, and actually we feel quite vulnerable. So if you feel able to, if there isn't a reason not to, just try sitting quietly. I mean, let people know that you need to be undisturbed for a little while. Find the quietest part of the house that you can. I'll often as well, I'll put my headphones on if I need to kind of shut out any noise. Sometimes people like a little bit of music. I do myself sometimes, a little bit of, nothing with lyrics particularly, but a little bit of relaxing music. And what always helps me, and I teach it to my own students, is this ability to just sit with yourself, let whatever arise, because it's coming up for a reason, okay? Because some of us have a habit of maybe dismissing what we're feeling, ignoring what we're feeling, but maybe to just sit and literally ask yourself, what am I feeling? Or rather, because we're not even looking for a narrative particularly. It's how am I feeling? Where am I feeling this? Because it will be manifesting in the body somewhere. It's not all in the head. There will be sensations in the body that maybe bother you, or you're just aware of. But if you can do that, I think that's a really good place to start, to just sit with yourself. And that can be the hardest thing, to just sit with yourself. Sometimes maybe this is why we do like music, or we like a little distraction. I almost said a little cheat then, but it's not. It's just kind of a bit of a crutch that we might need to kind of guide us in, hold our hand to take us in a little bit further. And
you said there, just pick up on you mentioned about the distraction, and I've read about it being described like that at moments where people are refraining from acknowledging their emotions, so they're looking for a distraction. They're looking for something that takes their mind away from what they're beginning to feel. And I certainly see that with clients. I've discussed this in in more detail with clients that come in, particularly with back pain. So back pain, anything along the spine. So in the lower back, middle back, the neck, the shoulder area. I'm a big believer that the large majority of cases with those symptoms have a deep-rooted emotional driver to it. So that's exactly the sort of thing I'd imagine at the moment that people are experiencing more and more in this circumstance. You know, the emotions of fear, anxiety, the uncertainty of it all will ultimately lead us to become tenser. They become very tight in the tissue of the body, and that's where getting better at your breathing process, as you've mentioned there, getting better at just acknowledging those emotions and giving yourself some time without distraction to kind of process them. And as you started off, as we both did, the importance of moving. So going out, getting some exercise, but stimulating the circulation. That's crucial. And I know that you're a huge advocate of perhaps, if you could, incorporating the two. It would make perfect sense if people used the time to exercise as well as their own time to themselves. You know, it gives them the opportunity to do that mindfulness. So do you advocate that yourself, that this sort of incorporation of moving, breath practice at the same time?
Absolutely. I mean, I say it a lot in my own classes, but breathe and move, you know, especially when fear is taking hold of you. I think it's important to say as well, Rob, that, you know, at the minute people might be agitated or fatigued, or the fear and worry that they're feeling is manifesting in a particular way, and they don't recognize it for what it really is, which is where I think if you can sit with that and try and understand yourself a little bit better, that's great. What I'm not advocating is that you do that for long periods every day, you know, put a little bit of time aside and maybe daily and just see how that goes. But I would also as well advocate, I know I'm aware that some people cannot get outside for whatever reason. And so the breath is there, literally, you know, at the tips of your nose. It's kind of, it's everybody can breathe, everybody can improve their mood through their breath. But if you can combine breath and movement, all the better. We're holding all of this, like you say, in the tissue. There's a kind of another way of looking at, very similar in yoga philosophy, you know, where we hold these things in the subtle body, and energy and thoughts and breath are all really interlinked, and each one really affects the other, and they all affect the physical body, and then they all affect how we see the world and how our mood is. If we move and we open up, we begin to let these things out. So I see it as when you move, then externally you're creating space, and also internally, but then the breath is there to create all this space from within. And the breath is like super powerful, far more powerful than a lot of people would realize. But it doesn't have to be anything vigorous. You know, not everybody is up for vigorous exercise. It doesn't have to be anything vigorous, but however you can, just open yourself up. Think about posture, think about, you know, opening your collarbones, think about what happens when you're feeling kind of a bit down and depressed or anxious or whatever. Get yourself opened up and breathe. And, you know, I teach yin yoga as well. And in yin yoga, it's based on the premise that chi, energy, gets stuck in the joints. So we hold postures for a long time. We place the body in a particular way to create this stimulation, to move energy through. And that's kind of what's happening with us now, in that if we're living in fear and we're, you know, constantly anxious, we're holding this stuff, it's stuck in the body. So we need to breathe it out, we need to move. And I think if you are up for more vigorous exercise, go and do it so you feel your ribs expand, you know, you feel your lungs expand, you feel your heart rate starting to rise. And so I'm a massive advocate. Move and breathe. Whatever the situation you find yourself in, you know, in yoga, all emotions are just considered essential kind of messengers. We don't kind of say, well, this is negative, but you know, in the normal world, if you think of them as negative emotions, if you learn to breathe better and you move and breathe, you're gonna feel better. And
so that they're interlinked, right? They are, that's it. You know, we know that the diaphragm and its connections through the body are pretty much, I see it as the gateway between the top and the bottom of the body anyway. But by moving more as best as you can, as you rightly said there, some people can't get outside, but perhaps they can move within the space that they have available to them, whatever that might be. If you can get outside, absolutely take advantage of that daily exercise. Stimulate more movement to stimulate more diaphragmatic work. Accompany that with breathing, with breath practice, whether that's during your exercise or whether that's just at home in a comfortable posture. And it makes a lot of sense. And I think as you said as well, it's a truly powerful tool that we all have available to us. And you know, you don't need to spend a load of money on learning to breathe more efficiently and more powerfully to help with the emotions that we all have at the moment. Brilliant. Thank you so much for summarizing this to talk us through the power of the breath. And as I said at the start, and as you mentioned, we'll supplement this conversation with a guided, like a guided meditation for people. Is that what you're thinking?
I think if we offer a mindfulness meditation, because you know, it will be completely new to a lot of people, and maybe a little bit of breathing practice as well. I mean, what I would say is that don't be too forceful with the breath, because if you suddenly start to breathe really, you know, falling, it's going to make you dizzy, you know.
Yeah.
Make you feel lightheaded.
Like everything else that we practice, whether it's an exercise, so many people have obviously gone back to perhaps running for the first time in a long time, or just looking for something to do, which is understandable, probably putting themselves into more vulnerable positions and postures than ever before, which is absolutely fine. But the breathing, the breath practice fits into that. Give it time, practice it, and perhaps don't be surprised if it is quite difficult to begin with. You know, it's something that we all used to do very well as kids, and we lose sight of how powerful it is. So brilliant. Yeah, some breath practice cues, some mindfulness cues, something that people could incorporate even on their daily exercise. So perhaps they could pop the headphones in, listen to your tutorial as they do their exercise. That would be brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, man. I will get back in touch again shortly. We'll have another chat on another subject, perhaps, as we go forwards with this. In the meantime, what are you up to rest of the day?
A bit of gardening, I think, and yeah, not much else, but I kind of quite like that. I'm trying to keep that sense of a weekend still as well, because otherwise every day is like is a weekend day.
Yeah, as far as my kids are concerned, every day is a Saturday. We've had a very, very long weekend so far. So yeah, getting back to it. Right, well, take care of you and yours. I hope everyone's well. We'll speak to you soon.
And you. See you later. Bye.
Cheers, Anne. Bye. Bye.
Bye.